got me some, and I just made it here in the nick of time. Good morning, Dr. Lamb. Good morning.
Good afternoon. How are you? It feels like morning to me too.
I'm doing well. I was just telling Ann, she and I both are tired.
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
Hey, Ann, how are you?
I am well. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm very good. Love those earrings.
Thank you.
They're very pretty, yes.
Thank you. I just got to New York at 2:00 this morning.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
my.
Right. I'm tired.
No wonder you're tired. Yes.
Yeah. I left after work yesterday, so I'm tired.
You
Right.
you can rest when you're dead. You can't be tired.
That's what my dad said. He was like, I said, but Daddy, I got up at 4:00 and we are driving from North Carolina to New York. And he was like, you can rest when you're dead. Don't worry about it. You're young yet.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I tell you, I upset a lunchroom lady 40 years ago when I was assistant principal. She was talking about her husband. He was a local pastor, but I hate that I did, but I still contend that age is a state of mind. If you lay down, you'll die. But if you keep going,
Right.
if you'll keep going, now you know there's times you got to rest, but if you'll keep going, but it goes back to Newton's law. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. I'm afraid to quit. I just got to work every day. I'm afraid to quit, but I'm from a different generation. I understand that. I understand that my ethic is not that of other generations, and I acknowledge that. But I also acknowledge that I've seen way too many people just talk themselves into being old and laying down and becoming ineffectual and then passing on. Nope. I can rest later. I'm fine. I'm good. I'll just keep going. But that's not for everybody. I get it. But, but time life, what is it? Time life management. What is that? What is that? Work life balance. That's not a thing for school administration. Never was. Now, I told you I did a dissertation last year at this time. That was on the 7 pillars of health um, and I told her, I said, I'll be glad to work methodology and help you with this, but now don't ask me to be your content person. I don't think this is a thing. It's not of my generation. There is no such thing as work-life balance for school administrators. And so, I did methodology and we did fine, but she had to I had a current principal work with her on content area because a younger principal that that understood the concept of work-life balance as it relates to the school principalship, especially in an elementary school. I said, I can't help you there. I was an elementary principal. Been a long time, A, but B, it wasn't a thing when I was an elementary principal. I've told y'all the story. If the lunchroom lady was out, I put on a hairnet and served lunch. I had hair back then. If the bus driver was out, I drove the bus. When the custodian was out, I mopped the floors. I didn't have an assistant principal, had over 600 kids. I did all the observations. It wasn't. Now, I'm not saying it ought to be that way. I'm just saying it is that way. And folks who are looking for work-life balance don't need to be in this line of work. It will never go well for you because you'll always be angry, upset. It's a mental thing. All right. So tonight we're continuing with our Essex chapters. Let me share my screen and pull up some of the things that I have. Y'all don't need to see any of that stuff. I'll just go ahead and close them. Say,
were we supposed to send you ours to you, or
no? You can just present it.
Okay.
All right. So Angela and Ruth are presenting, and then I'm presenting tonight. And I actually prepared. I can't believe it either.
Awesome.
For mine. All right. So Angela, I'm gonna stop my share, and we'll get right to it here. You can do your presentation.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Let me share my screen with you. Hold on. Can y'all see that?
We can.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
see, now she's
so,
embarrassed me with how nice hers looks.
oh, thank you. Well, so I had to do chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 9 is on discrimination and employment, and chapter 10 is on recruitment, tenure, and dismissal. So, constitutional, federal, and state law prohibits discriminatory practices when hiring. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is one of the most significant pieces of civil rights legislation because of its profound impact on employment practices as it relates to race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. My next slide actually outlined several of several federal statutes that are very important. I just got a few there. A few that I wanted to talk about is, first of all, the second one, the Equal Pay Act of 1963. This particular statute prohibits wage discrimination. It mandates that men and women are given equal pay for equal work in the same establishment. And then if you look down, you'll see some others. Number 5, I thought was very interesting. With that one, it says that the Title II of the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008 protects individuals against employment discrimination on the basis of genetic information. Now, Title I of this same act protects against discrimination as it relates to health insurance. I thought that was interesting. My next slide, I have a few more. Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978 and FMLA. My next slide is about Title VII and employment discrimination. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, was amended in 1972 to include educational institutions. And then I also outlined two very important or significant cases. The first one that actually established a legal framework for assessing employment discrimination claims. And the second one, the Supreme Court held that an employer's method of hiring did not constitute racial discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act if the method was not intended to discriminate and did not result in discriminatory impact. Okay. 14th Amendment and equal protection. The Equal Protection Clause is the core of the 14th Amendment. Brown versus Board of Education ruled that racial segregation in public schools violated the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Am I going too fast, y'all?
No.
Okay, good. Because I didn't want to just read like the slides. I just wanted to, I had the information on the
Just
slide.
highlight them. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way you're supposed to do it. We're adults.
Okay. Very good. My next one, wait a minute. I done messed up, y'all. Hold on. Okay, so anyway, this is, I'm gonna rock with it. This has to do with teacher strikes and the legal context and implications. I outlined what it says about the legal framework, permitted states, and implications of illegal strikes. I think this was supposed to actually go in my chapter 10, but it got there. And as you can see, it says that 13 states actually permit strikes under certain statutory conditions, and I have those states outlined there. Okay. Yeah, that one's out of place. That was chapter 10, but now this is back to chapter 9. This one is about due process and employment discrimination. So I've outlined the two different types of due process. The first one is a right to a hearing, notice, and opportunity to respond. And the second one, those laws are that states pretty much that laws are not to be vague at all. And then I went a little bit into tenure, and for tenure, I want it to be known that tenure offers teachers specific rights to due process. A non-tenured teacher's rights are different from tenured teachers. And from my understanding from the book, it seems like they were trying to say that if you are non-tenured, that you are an at-will employee.
You are.
Okay.
In remember, North Carolina is a right to work state. You can't unionize. Can't unionize, number one. Number two, you have no expectation of continued employment unless you're tenured. We don't have tenure anymore in North Carolina. It went out a few years back. So pretty much everybody is an at-will employee. Now, if you have continuing status, they have to give you a reason why. If your licensure, if you're still provisional or BT, and you don't have continuing or full licensure, they don't even have to give you a reason. You're considered at will. They can dismiss you at the end of any contract, the 1 year contract period. Now, if you have career status in North Carolina, they have to give you a reason. They can still let you go, but they have to give you a reason.
Yeah. Okay.
On due process.
Okay, so the next one outlines Title IX. Title IX is administered by the Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Education. And then I highlighted a case. In the case of North Haven Board of Education versus Bell, the Supreme Court ruled that Title IX applies to and prohibits sexual discrimination in employment. Key legal cases I have outlined there as it relates to Title IX. I said that Title IX covers and protects both employees and students. Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1988 made Title IX applicable to entire institutions if any part receives federal funds at all. Okay. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the American with Disabilities Act of 1990 mandates non-discrimination and extends beyond the school environments to all federally funded programs. And then I have a little bit about Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It prohibits discrimination against any qualified person with a disability concerning employment, training, compensation, promotion, benefits, and terms and conditions of employment. So now we're going into my chapter 9. This chapter was about recruitment, dismissal, and tenure. So I said recruiting school staff requires adherence to anti-discrimination laws, as well as best practices to ensure equal opportunity employment. So I have some legal considerations on one side. I have those outlined, and then I have some best practices, and a lot of these we've actually discussed in class. We've talked about recruitment. We've talked about, I didn't put it here, but interviewing, like how to do your interviews, what should be involved, what questions to ask during an interview. Okay, the next one has to do with tenure and dismissal. And there I have that tenure laws and evaluation processes for school leaders and teachers are designed to ensure high standard of educational practices while providing due process protections. And then under that, I also wrote school law regarding dismissal for cause typically involves specific legal procedures and grounds for dismissal that educators and administrators must follow. And then I have a few general aspects that should be considered. And I have those listed there. Legal grounds for dismissal, due process, documentation, which documentation is very important. Well, all of them are. But you always hear a lot about documentation. Union involvement, which we don't have to worry about that in North Carolina, and state and local variations because they will differ from state to state. Okay, my next one is the Fair Labor Standard Act. This is a federal law that sets standards for minimum wage, overtime pay, eligibility, record keeping, child labor protections, and things like that. Right to work. right to work statutes prohibit unions, security agreements, which restrict unions from requiring membership dues or fees as a condition of employment. That's something that we don't have in North Carolina. And I have currently 24 states have enacted rights to work laws. Well, I'm talking about the unions is what we don't have in North Carolina. Now, this is just a couple of things that I learned. Legal framework, understanding the legal framework that governs education helps individual navigate the roles within schools more effectively. Now, since I've been in the program, I think now a lot about the legalities of certain situations and different situations as they occur. Just in real time at my own school, I'm always thinking about the legal ramifications of everything. I think about rights and responsibilities also. School law outlines the rights and responsibility of different stakeholders. I think about the civil rights and discrimination, and also policy development. That's a thing I've never thought about before, but I find that I do now. Now, this is for my slide about implications. Incorrectly dealing with situations involving school law can have a profound effect on both the individual as well as the school district as a whole. And then I talked about some things, depending on what the situation is. It could be legal liability, the district could lose funding. It could be damage to your reputation, loss of accreditation for the school, and as well as administrative consequences. Okay, now this is, I know we had to answer questions. This was one of the questions that had to do with reduction in force. So addressing the situation of implementing a RIF with the potential allegations of retaliation due to a past discrimination claim. So this is some things or some ways I would actually, these are some things that would guide me in a situation that's like this. Number one, to counter the employee's potential charge of retaliation, I know that I must demonstrate that the recommendation for the RIF was based on legitimate and non-discriminatory reasons, which is a decline in the school enrollment as well as budget cuts. The second thing, I would need data related to declining enrollment as well as budget cuts to justify the need for the RIF. Thirdly, the decision to include or exclude any teacher from the RIF should be based solely on legitimate factors that are not discriminatory. And then I go on to say, to legally defend my recommendation for the RIF, I would do these things: ensure compliance with all state, federal, and local laws. Also, documentation again, clearly articulating non-discriminatory reasons for selecting each teacher that I selected. I'm gonna be prepared to demonstrate that the RIF was necessary for my department, my school, or my district. Well, actually, for my department or my district, and I would avoid any actions that could be perceived as me retaliating or anything like that towards that particular employee. And then my next one was a recruitment question. Okay, it had to do with a principal wanting to recruit male teachers. So I said, addressing the recruitment focus on male teachers in the elementary school setting, especially in the inner city urban area, include balancing educational goals and legal considerations. The first one, y'all, let me just blow this up a little bit because I can't see. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. If I can. Okay, focusing recruitment solely on male teachers may not be justified if it is discriminating against other qualified female candidates. That's something I will keep in mind. The legal issues primarily revolve around potential gender discrimination. Number three, providing male role models for students from single parent households is a commendable goal, but it must be balanced against legal principles of non-discrimination. The most feasible method of achieving my goal in a legal manner, number one, having a broad recruitment, campaign or efforts, promote diversity and consider all candidates, no matter whether they're male or whatever. I have to consider everyone. So that's my PowerPoint. Do you have any questions?
Excellent. I've got a few points if nobody else has any.
Okay.
All right. So you can stop your share. Let's talk about the last one there about hiring for specific characteristics, demographics. You can do that, but you don't advertise it. We had a situation where we were looking for an admin in our office in Gardner Webb, and I said, "Why'd y'all hire the pregnant girl? She worked 2 weeks, went on leave, and then never came back. She just wanted insurance. She couldn't have her baby in the hospital because she was uninsured." I said, "How'd y'all not know that?" "Well, we couldn't discriminate against her because she's pregnant, but that didn't mean you had to hire her. You didn't have to. You didn't, now don't send her out. We didn't hire you because you're pregnant, or we didn't." But a lot of these things that you can do, but you don't tell everything you know. If you as a principal, it's perfectly legitimate if you think I need a man in that position, but I don't go out and put it on the job announcement, I'm only going to hire a man. So we have to be careful to understand that being prohibited from doing something doesn't mean that we have to do the opposite, that we have to hire that pregnant girl, or we have to hire a woman rather than the man that we want. No, if the man's qualified. Now, on RIFs, one of the things that Angela didn't mention because she was looking from the district perspective, and she was right. At the school perspective, you have to look at certifications. Let me remind you of that. You can get tripped up really hard on RIFs if you're not looking at certifications. Don't assume what people's certifications are. You can do a licensure lookup, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And make sure that you're within the parameters of that on the licensure deal. I've made that mistake myself. You get into it on that elementary, middle school deal. What are they really certified in? And sometimes you end up having to let people go that you would have kept because of their differences in the certification, or you have to move people around or do something like that. So if you're at the school level, make sure that you plan ahead on that certification on a RIF. On hiring, I've said this before and I'll say it again, know the difference between substantive and procedural due process on hiring. There are 9 specific things federal government says you have to do to hire a person. Remember, if we don't, we lose our federal money. Now, as a district, you need to determine and write it down who does which of those 9 things. Don't just assume that, oh, we're going to do these 9 things. Here's what the law says, the 9 things that we have to do. You must write it down. Again, I'll tell you, I worked in one of the wealthiest districts, the wealthiest district in the state, and I worked in one of the poorest. I did all 9 in the poor district. I did none of the 9 in the wealthy district as a sitting principal. You have to know who advertises the job, who determines there's a vacancy, who does the interviewing, who does the reference check, who does the background check, who does the drug testing, who makes the questions. All that stuff. That's what the substance of due process is. You got to do these things. The procedure is who in your district does those things. What role does HR play versus the school principal versus the curricular area that we're hiring for? Make sure that everybody knows the actual procedure. Now, I've got a really good PowerPoint, and I won't bring it up, but again, that goes through the personnel life cycle. But I want to speak quickly to action plan and dismissal. Let me pull it up right quick. Let me share my screen. Come on now. Let's go through some of this stuff. What in the world? All right. So here in the real world, this is how it works. I call mine MTSS teacher because it's a support plan. But one of the problems that many districts do on their support plan for their schools, they don't understand that they also have to dovetail legally into an action plan if the support doesn't work. They only are looking at it from the support notion or this dismissal notion. It has to be seamless according to due process. It has to start with one and then seamlessly transition to the other. It can't be two different processes. Let me say that again. The support into termination dismissal has to be one seamless process. It can't be one and then the other. When you go to court, if people, sue you for dismissal. So whatever your content of your walkthroughs are done or whatever, but so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we've done staff development on good best teaching practices, usually Marzano. We have to make sure that we've done that. With our beginning teachers, we have to start them with a peer, with a mentor. That. It's a requirement, and it has to start the first day of school. That's what I'm talking about. You say, well, we'll get that later on because that's for support. No, for dismissal purposes, that's why these have to be integrated together. For support purposes, it's not important that you start the first day of school. You would let them go a couple of weeks and kind of get their, but for dismissal person, it has to start the first day. That's why these have to integrate. So your one-on-one peer coaching with your mentor for your beginning teachers has to start day one. And we go through the first quarter period on that. And one of the things you need to make sure, again, that their planning times don't match. Let me say that again. Make sure their planning times don't match. And you say, well, Dale, wait a minute. That's what we always do. No, you got to unbalance the schedule here. When we go to court, we're going to, the first thing is going to be asked, was the mentor teacher in that room during her planning period, when the young teacher was teaching? Well, no, they were on planning at the same time. Did that young teacher have an opportunity on her planning teacher to go watch the mentor teacher? Well, no, they were on planning at the same time. Again, we need for them not to be on planning at the same time, so one can go observe the other one either way. Again, that's part of that legal part of it. Now, it might be better on the support side to have them planning at the same time, but on the legal side, it's not good. When you go to court, you have to show that the modeling could happen. And we pick up second semester with low performing teachers according to their EVOS work and their evaluations. We have to pick them up second quarter. We have to give them the first quarter to see if they did better than they did last year. Again, we can't start continuing teachers from day one and trying to get them support. We have to give them 9 weeks to see how it's going. Now, we already have identified them from their data from the previous year, and that happens sometime during that first quarter. All of our test scores and our EVOS scores comes back in. And so by the second quarter, we know who our low performing teachers are. And so we start them on that one-on-one with support. And then mid-year, either one of these groups mid-year, we have to put them on an action plan by mid-year. And then by the end of the third quarter, we have to give them the notice of non-renewal. So this has to be a district-wide plan. It can't just be what we do at this school or that school or the other school. This is a district-wide plan of how we work with beginning teachers or how we work with low-performing teachers that both supports them on one hand, but is legally defended if they sue us for whatever reason for terminating them. So that's what that is. All right. And I think Angela has covered everything. So from my perspective, you got to have a plan. You got to have a plan on hiring in terms of who's going to do what. And you got to have a plan on dismissal on how it's going to work. And both of these are consistent across your entire district. That this is the procedural part of due process. We always have these handbooks that say we're going to do these things, but we never say who's going to do them. And that's when we get hosed when we go to court. It's not that we don't have policies and we don't have procedures. We just don't ever make it clear who does them. And they don't get us on the substance of due process. They always get us on the procedure. We didn't follow our own rules. That's always 100%. We get killed on due process. It's because we didn't follow our own rules. That's the way that works. All right, Angela, excellent job.
Thank you.
Golf clap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well covered. All right. I've stopped my share. And so,
Okay.
Ruth, are you up next?
Yes, sir.
Go right
Let
ahead.
me pull it up. Okay, I'm in charge of chapter 11 and 12, and chapter 11 deals with the instructional program and school attendance, and then chapter 12 is dealing with school desegregation. See if I can just, yeah, let me do this way. All right, so for the introduction, oh, I left that in there. I meant to take that out. All right, so dealing with the 10th Amendment, we have to talk about the control of what's going on. And this is something that we've talked about in class. As for the schools are under the control of the state. Legislatures is the main control of the state for schools at the public's expense. State separated into districts. Then we deal with the conduct of school, qualifications of teachers, and subjects that need to be taught. From this point, we go on, and what had happened with attendance is that there was a large case about in New York where you had to attend 90% of class in order to receive credit. And students went against this and it was rejected. So then we had other cases such as Wisconsin and Yoder, and this is where they wanted the child to attend up until 8th grade. And a lot of these dealt with people that worked on farms or they had to travel and do seasonal type work. And that's why they had a lot of other districts. And then they had the Church of Gods versus Amarillo School District. And then this one, it was missing school due to religious-based situations. And then they talked about where children were emancipated. They were married at a certain age. And also control of people's expressions. They went on and dealt with truancy, which was a major issue up until, we did a lot with COVID, and now they're starting to work on policies for attendance now because people have gotten used to not giving reasons for being out or just saying, oh, they were sick, oh, the computers were down. So now policies are being revamped so that there's some type of consequence for people missing school. Then we went on to McKinney-Vento. These are people that have been homeless. And the school systems are to work with those that are displaced in certain situations such as these, and they have an actual program that help reach out and talk to the parents and deal with how they can assist them to make sure they are in attendance at school. For enrollment and transportation, schools enroll homeless and less documented documents with transportation provided. For those in homeschool, children are taught at home by a parent and guardian. They must follow state guidelines for curriculum and attendance. And generally, they state that if people home taught make higher passing rate on state exams. Then we talked about, in the book, it discussed different facilities that take place within the school systems, and it tells you in the residence, it wants it to stay calm, be active listening, pause and reflect, and they have to maintain that eye contact. And to me, this made me think about being in a hybrid situation where we had a lot of people that they would close their screens. You didn't know if the kids were participating or any of that. Um, and and so for me, I thought about mainly COVID and hybrid at this point. And then it went over how the curriculum standards are aligned, and then other special interest groups that are allowed to use facilities in school. And then it brought up the No Child Left Behind, which has more information within this chapter. So in this chapter, it went on and talked about No Child Left Behind and when it was developed. And the purpose of the development was so that no child, everyone, it tried to help everyone to be treated equally and consistently, which you have, I feel like there are more things you will have to work on for everyone to treat all kids equally. It's more also internal for people, things that you can't control. But with this, they went with schools, districts, and schools that failed to make adequately yearly progress towards statewide proficiency goals um, over time was subject to improvement. And all these people would come into your building to help you get on target and pass all these scores because you had all these extra people helping you with students that struggle. So, of course, there should be some growth. Whereas the other schools, they might have had differences in the clientele that they dealt with. And then it started providing more choices for parents and students. So in different areas, you had different magnet schools. They started bringing in other schools that um, tried to cross communities. They were trying to bring people in because of the school setting that was being offered. Was it the arts? Was it foreign languages? Was it global? So those things started moving in. And then you had greater flexibility for state, school districts, and other schools with this No Child Left Behind. And so with this chapter, I just had some of the final tips and takeaways that I have was the main thing was about whose responsibility is it? So I have the school, the district, I have teacher, parent, community, and stakeholders. And then down at the bottom, I kind of put politicians because one of the things that we're having now is the ones that are in control are the ones with the money. And when they're having the money, they're telling people where they want their funds to go in regards to this. But when you're talking about your building, you're also dealing with a lot of teachers, parents, and the community stakeholders whose voice is being heard and who's speaking out. And then I also put on the side some of the information that was in the chapter dealing with accountability, who participates, that adequate yearly progress, which most of us, if you've been in it for a while, you're used to that. The public school of choice, which one do you want your child to go to? Is it full, or how are you going to get in if it's full? They usually have some kind of process to see if a lottery or something like that to see if your child's going to get in. Um, then it had supplemental services for kids or parents, those type of things that needed it at those schools. Some schools now have it where everybody gets free and reduced lunch. And now we're trying to see if that's going to continue after your ESSER funds are gone. And then making sure that you have highly qualified teachers, and also looking at your paraprofessionals, restructuring, and alternative governance. So those were some things that were in that chapter that I don't forgot my chapter 10. 11. So our next thing that we looked at was equal but separate. So in this book, it talked about how things are equal, but it's separate. So although we have trying to give every school the same things, all the schools did not need the same situation or the same resources, which created problems. So in districts courts, they were mandated to supervise the transition from dual segregated systems to unitary desegregated school systems. And from that point, it went on to how it imposed certain situations on the school systems and students within that community. And that's leads from where I was talking about they were bringing in the school choices and the magnet programs and how they are transferring students a long distance to go to help a school be equally segregated. I mean, not, excuse me, integrated. So with this, the district court had imposed a racial balance requirement of 71% to 29% on individual schools. And when they did this, it required that people just had to travel a long distance. And there was a complaint of this just was not fair to their children to be on a bus for hours, or how they started with the gerrymandering of school lines. And with that, when you draw these different lines, it makes it where with politicians in one area, they already know that they're going to get that vote. And so a lot of times the districts are continually drawing these lines thinking that it's going to either stop African Americans from being in this school zone or certain brown kids from being in this school area. So they had maps, that do not tell the whole story of non-contiguous school zones. And that's a lot of problems that we're still having that's taking place. And then we have with the transportation, 18 million of nation's public school children, approximately 39% were transported to their schools by bus in 1969 to 1970. And as it further went along, of course, these things changed. An objection to transportation of students may have validity when the time or distance of travel is so great as to either risk the health. And this is some of the things I was already talking about, where children are on the bus so long, or they have to get up so early to be on that bus for a long period of time. So pairing and clustering and grouping of non-contiguous school zones were considered by the courts to be permissible remedies to achieve desegregated schools. And it also created an intra-district violation. The magnet concept could not be supported by the existence of white flight. The district's courts for state contributions to salary increases, quality education programs, and capital improvement were thereby reversed. The 14th Amendment also prohibited segregation in this way. And so the de facto meant the effect, and the de jure mean being rightful. So busing was initiated almost as one-way concept simply because Black students were bused to allegedly better schools in white neighborhoods. And of course, you know that it doesn't actually mean that you're at a better school because you're with a different socio-economical class, or it doesn't just pertain to that. There are other things that apply in those situations. Free transfer and freedom of choice. So on this, I put whose freedom of choice is it? Because one person's perception of what is free, what is better is different than someone else's. So they pointed out that although transfers were available to those who chose to attend school, where their race was in the majority, there was no provision for students to transfer to a school in which his or her race was in the minority unless he or she could show good cause for transfer. Racial segregation derived from the enforcement of law is called de jure segregation, and is illegal and unconstitutional and does not exist today. It has been initiated or supported by government action with an intent or motive to discriminate, and the action must result in creating or increasing segregation. And then another example that I put on here, example of false de facto segregation emerged in New York, and the Board of Education realigned several school attendance boundaries and permitted transfers only of white students who live within those boundaries of the school. So it seems as you can make anything work to your advantage. You just have to pay attention to whose ideas and what they're doing in these situations to ensure that what students are needing is there, and it's just the first priority is make sure the students are receiving what is needed and not creating health issues or undue stress. So then they added more information about the No Child Left Behind because it started having different phases. So with this, it was amended, the Elementary and Secondary School Act of 1965. The No Child Left Behind focuses on closing the achievement gap, improving student achievement, and changing the culture of schools in America. Desegregation orders have been lifted in Denver, Colorado, and you can see some of the other states that are there. And then based on this development, the board adopted the student reassignment plan. And this kind of stopped, or they were trying to stop the unwanted desegregation and the long rides and things such as that. And then the U.S. Court of Appeals 11th Circuit ruled that the district court had properly dismissed the constitutional and Title VI complaints based on the failure of the parents to prove the board's actions had been motivated by racial discrimination. So for my scenario, I did desegregation and teacher transfer. A board of education in an urban school district of 160,000 students adopted a teacher transfer policy in each of its schools to establish a racial composition that was within 10% of the racial composition of the district population as a whole. This policy was not mandated by the court. Essentially, this policy restricted voluntary transfer of Black and white teachers to other schools within the district, but also required reassignment of other teachers. The policy was challenged by Teachers Association, which claimed a violation of teachers' 14th Amendment rights. And so what I did was put these arrows about segregation, integration, and inclusion, which are some practices that the school building have when they're dealing with students in themselves. Does the teacher association have a valid claim? Why or why not? And they do have a claim in that they needed to follow certain procedures, and it was not something that was by law. And they were basically doing their own thing is what I would call it. Is the district justified in the formulation of this transfer policy? Why or why not? When they talk about a transfer policy, first they need to go to policies that are already in effect. So when we looked at this, and they talked about how many students adopted a teacher transfer policy and what the percentage was of racial composition, we also have to look at, is this a community? Why is it that we're needing to do this change? And let me see, hold on. Lost my train of thought. It's just fine. And I would say if there were too many people voluntarily trying to move and it caused one school building to be overcrowded, then those are some things that you would need to look at and have something in place so people know, okay, these are your qualifications. If you're in this district within our area, then these are the schools that you would attend. If this district, and then if there was some reason, a lot of reasons that it is allowed, if a teacher works at a certain school, then their child most likely would be able to go to the same school in which they teach or something like that, unless there is some true valid point as to why they need to change, then usually it's not warranted. Should the policy be race neutral? For me, I think all situations should be race. It doesn't need to be based on race. Most people would like to see some that look as they look. But if that is a situation that is not occurring, I don't think it's a win-lose for anybody, as long as you have the qualified staff to make sure those things are in place to make sure everyone is successful and that they're growing those students and having high expectations. A lot of times I can hear or think about with my grandparents, or talking about how schools, when they were growing up and they were segregated, how their teachers made sure they knew what they needed to know before they moved on. They didn't care what age you were, your size, you had to know it before you could go to that next stage. And a lot of times now, some kids are getting looked over, passed over, and even if you had a learning disability, they made sure you knew what needed to be learned. Do you feel that such a policy is arbitrary or capricious? Excuse me. For me, when it comes to that, I feel that um, that policy can be arbitrary, and it depends on who's looking at it and from what mindset they're looking at this situation. Because in the area in which I work, a lot of times now I can hear from people how it used to be, which some of it still is, that they do not want certain people in their area. They do not want certain people to participate or be over certain programs in the school district. So that's, I mean, I'm just getting this experience from where I am now, how backwards things are truly going, and maybe it never even changed. How would the court likely view this policy? Um, for me, I thought since it was not in law, sometimes you have to create a law or introduce a law that is going to be better fitting for your area or for certain people to make sure things are equitable. And when it comes to desegregating with the school systems, and what are the administrative implications? My thing is all administrative. They're going to need to know policies and know how to work with anybody, whatever color, and not be scared to talk to certain people. And in this retrospect, dealing with the school systems and transferring and trying to make the school look basically half and half, in a sense, to make sure it looks like some are there in that situation. And then that's all that I had for those two chapters.
Excellent.
Are
Let's
there
go back.
any questions?
Yeah, let's go back to your last slide.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
We talked about North Carolina as a right to work state, right? No
Yes.
unions. All right. So Teachers Association, do they have a valid claim? Why or why not? No, they don't. In North Carolina, you don't have a work location in your contract. Who hires you? The Board of Education.
Education. Mm-hmm.
And you can be assigned to any school. Now, I'm not saying this is the same everywhere, but I'm telling you in North Carolina, in a right to work state where contracts are only with the Board of Education, you are not assigned to a specific work location. They can move you anywhere that they want to. They can employ you anywhere. And that is not harming you under the 14th Amendment. Are they justified in, they can pass any policy they want to.
Dr.
Again,
Lamb.
right to work state. Yes.
Is that why some
We lost your audio. And I'm sorry. We still know
I've
audio
noticed now
on.
in our district that they put generic.
Wait a minute. We still can't hear you. Yeah, it just says you're employed by the district. That's exactly right. And they can move you wherever they want to. It also that also helps at the 20 days when some schools made their attendance on their projected, what we talked about, that swag, stupid wild ass guess. That's all of your allotment sheet is projection is a guess. And if you didn't get the kids, but another school did, we just move them over there. It covers us on that 20-day rule as well. I mean, that's the good part of it. The bad part is we can send you anywhere we want to, for any reason that we want to. How would the case, the court in North Carolina, the court wouldn't hear this case. There's no case here. Now, in other states they would, but in North Carolina they wouldn't. As a right to work state, the employer is king. They pretty much do whatever they want to. That's what right to work state means, is all the power rests with the employing agency, period. You have no rights really in North Carolina as the employee. You have none. The employer has them all. So that's, now I would argue just because you can doesn't mean you should, but we see the gerrymandering that goes on with voting districts. Again, it's legal, and every time they lose in court, they just make it worse and keep going back. But generic APs, yeah, I mean, you can be assigned anywhere, and especially on APs now that I mean, you may spend half your time at one school and half at another, or you may move half during the year. You have what they want to make sure is you have no property right to a location. That you have no property right to a location. You just work for the district. You can be sent anywhere.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure that we understand the litany here. In 1965, we had the Elementary and Secondary Act that was passed. 1965 Elementary and Secondary Act. No Child Left Behind in 2001 updated and expanded on Elementary and Secondary Act of 1965. Now, in 2015, the Every Child Succeeds Act, again, ESSA, the initial act, updated and expanded No Child Left Behind. So we're now under the federal order of Every Child Succeeds Act from 2015. It upheld all the parts of No Child Left Behind and added some more new ones to it. So make sure you understand that when you're referring to what is the legal federal driver of what's going on in schools today, it's the Every Child Succeed Act of 2015, which updated and expanded both No Child Left Behind from 2001 and Elementary and Secondary Act of 1965. That is the linear progression of where federal law we are under right now in public schools. Excellent job. Excellent job. All right. Now, for my part, and I'm going to be brief because I'm going to be spending a lot of time on Saturday when we're together next Saturday on mine. All right. So the last chapter of the book is on school finance. And so let me share my screen. And so what I'm going to cover with you when we have time together, there was the chapter guidance, and I can get out of that. are all the budget laws that you need to make sure that you understand. Now, this is the execution. This is not putting together a budget. This is how we execute. These are all the laws and how we disperse the money, the modified accrual accounting system, how we get monthly payments from the state after we spend it. First time they reimburse us, how to handle it, special funds for a school district, how to do it, board policies for schools that are how they're to handle money. All those things are in one handy dandy place. We'll cover this when we're together next. The chapter itself was basically let me move that out of the way. Was on public school, which was the Rodriguez case, taxation. We've talked about this. Money from public schools at the local level comes from property taxes and business taxes. And when you give them indemnification, just like Facebook, when it came to Rutherford County, they gave them money that came directly from schools, that incentive money, and don't tax them. That's what hurts schools. But equity in education, legal challenges. We've had several legal challenges. The landmark Rodriguez case that said we weren't giving enough and we weren't being equitable. But in the end, I'll go ahead and close that one. In the end, it has boiled down to the Leandro case in North Carolina. I need for you to read this to understand that, because we're going to spend some time on Leandro when we're together Saturday. Now, I have put it here. Don't tell me you've kicked me out of a blackboard. So under our class, if we go to our face-to-face weekend tab and we go to weekend 3, advocacy in leadership, you understand that advocacy is about money. It's all about finance. It's all about getting money for equity. And so what I have here is I have Leandro, which is a little quick and dirty PowerPoint that I made for you. But right here, this is that link, Leandro. Leandro was the landmark financing case in North Carolina. North Carolina has a flat grant funding formula, which means per pupil. Back in the day, in the early 90s, they gave $7,000 per pupil to every pupil in the state, regardless of the wealth of their district. What the problem was is Charlotte-Mecklenburg was adding another $7,000. And so they were using $14,000 to educate their children, whereas Hope County only had the $7,000. They didn't have any local wealth. And the lawsuit was don't give Mecklenburg as much, give Hope more. So in the end, they both had $11,000 to educate children. The court case was lost by the Leandro plaintiffs. Let me say that again. People think they won. No, they lost. We did not change the flat grant funding formula for schools. We did not change it. So today, if you're in Hope County, you get $8,000 a pupil. If you're in Mecklenburg, you get 8. That Mecklenburg can double that and add 8 more. That's the court said that's not our problem. That we have we don't have to remedy that, and locals can't remedy it either. That's the second case study in school law. That if you would have had it with me, you would know that if superintendent cannot move that money. That's why the last superintendent in Chapel Hill Carrboro got fired. She tried to give some students more money than others. Now, is it the right thing to do? Probably. But is it the legal thing to do? No, it's not. And so the standard here is the Leandro case. There is a Duke law. This is what they summarized the case for you. Let me share my screen. They held in the unanimous court, Supreme Court of North Carolina, that neither school districts nor county have any constitutional right to equal funding. You say, but it is equal. They gave everybody that in the end. It might have started out equal with the state money, but some places have the ability to give more money than others. And they only have to pay them enough for a sound basic education, and no bells and whistles, no frills. So, well, these people over here got this. Well, that's a frill. We only pay for a basic education. Well, how much is that? Whatever we give you, that's what it is. And so of equal significance, they said the state of North Carolina, not local school districts, has the constitutional obligation to actively safeguard that. So what it means is they're not going to differentiate the money, and neither can you. So you can't take money tracked for one kid and give it to another state money. And so the whole notion here of Leandro is we're giving you money, but you need to lead, Judge Lee, Judge Manning, all these different judges. They said, you've not been funding the basic education. They said, we'll start a lottery. As we know, that was a fool's errand. The lottery has provided no money for pupil expenditures, a little bit for capital, but that's just pork barrel. And so Leandro has been followed up with the West Ed report, and there's links in there to that. Again, it's under third Sunday under our third weekend on our Blackboard for our face-to-face sessions. But again, West Ed said now, what was it, $2 million, $2 billion with a B, that the General Assembly owes low wealth schools. And what did the General Assembly say? 90-90 boo-boo, you can't make me. And so that's where we are right now. They owe over $2 billion, but they're not paying. And we already talked about this. How much was the budget surplus this year? 500 million. And what did they do with it? They put it in a savings account. They put it in reserves so that they could give it to try to attract another employer to the state. There's a reason why North Carolina is rated #1 for business. Yeah, for the businesses, because they'll pay people to come and get nothing in return. So you need to understand Leandro. You need to read the West Ed report. But the overarching here is Rodriguez said that equal funding was not necessary, that you didn't have to do that. So the North Carolina ruling is based on Rodriguez. But again, advocacy for schools is about funding, and especially about funding for low wealth district and for disadvantaged kids. That's what advocacy in public education, that's what it is. It's not just, well, people say, well, advocacy, that means we support you. Well, how do you, a hale and hearty handshake and slap on the back is not support. I need money. What did Randy Moss say? Straight cash, homie. I need the money. That's what advocacy is. And you got to understand that. So that's why this chapter comes last in our book, in that we understand that advocacy is about how much money we get and how we use it, and advocating for the rights of disadvantaged kids. That's the whole notion of advocacy, because it's financial in nature. All right, our time is up. We went a little bit over tonight, but y'all did a great job on your chapters. I appreciate it again. I have some things for you to read, and read those links. Dig into Leandro. Leandro is what's most important. That's the most important law in North Carolina right now, by far, is Leandro. And the flat grant funding that goes along. But that court decision, Leandro versus North Carolina decision, and again, Leandro lost. We did not change the funding for him. That they said they'd give us some money that never showed up is immaterial. They didn't change the formula. The only way that you were ever going to guarantee that any money showed up for those kids was to change the formula. Because the other was just a gift and they're not giving. All right. I will see you all next Saturday in Goldsboro. All right. Give yourself a hand. You did a great job tonight. I'll see you next Saturday. Bye-bye.